What would the world be like if we all behaved like Jesus? That's today's subject on TGI Monday.
And welcome to TGI Monday. This week we've got a question that Holly asked us on Facebook. She asks, what would the world be like if everyone treated each other the way Jesus did? That's a really interesting question, Holly. Thanks for asking it. I think it's going to take a little bit of teasing out, isn't it? First of all, to think about how did Jesus treat other people? Maybe, Dan, do you want to start us off on that?
Not really, no. I've been thinking about this all week and I haven't got an answer for it. I think Jesus spoke to people who were in need very tenderly, and he protected them from people who were powerful and wanting to oppress them. He spoke to people who were powerful and oppressive in very hostile ways indeed. And, you know, there's a very interesting song came out, I think in the 60s, and it's hyperbole, but it's fun. If Jesus Christ were alive today, he'd be killed by the CIA.
Wow. Yeah. It's a good line.
And you know, there's something in that, isn't there? There's something, the powerful did get rid of him.
It's dangerous.
And you know, we can't deny that.
Yeah.
And I think that if we are actively trying to be as Christ is to the world, that is going to upset people.
Yeah.
It's upset Wonga very much. Have you seen their results this year? They plummeted, and absolutely right you say.
Well, that was in the gospel on the weekend, all right?
Wonga?
No, not Wonga. We had the story of the girl who was a slave girl who was possessed and was healed by Paul, and then the people who owned the slave got really upset because it cost them money. It's the same with the other story about the silversmiths who had to go at Paul because they were making idols and people weren't buying them anymore, so he got really cross about it. So there's a bit of that, but also as well, if you look at all the Jesuses we've got here, right, Bobbly Jesuses and Buddy Jesuses,
wearing a sash.
I think the point is with it is the temptation is for all of us to make Jesus in our own image, and that's something we always have to be aware of, because there's been 4 quests for the historical Jesus, and each time they've undertook that quest, they've all come back and said he's just like me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the problem. So we've always got to be aware of that.
I think when I read this question, the thing I thought about immediately was, you know, that whole "what would Jesus do" movement, and we all had these little wristbands, and you know,
not me, like.
No, well, I didn't either, but it was, you know, it's a big thing, wasn't it? What would Jesus do? And I was just reminded of it because there was a meme going around just before Easter that was something like, if someone asks you what would Jesus do, you've got to remember that overturning the tables and chasing people with whips is within the realm of possibilities. You know, it wasn't always gentle Jesus, meek and mild. You know, he could be, as Dan said, hostile and very challenging and disturbing and upsetting to the status quo, couldn't he? So what were you going to say?
Yeah, that actually Jesus was dangerous, and the theology of the Christian faith couldn't be further away from gentle Jesus, meek and mild, submit and be quiet about everything. It's much more radical than that, and dare I say political. I mean, if you've got 2 coats, give somebody one of them. If someone asks you for something, give them more than you ask. And actually that stuff, if you just boil it down to those 2 things of love God and love each other as much as you love yourself, the world would look so very different. And there are various political structures that try to bring out those things.
So let's try and pick up on some of that, because that's really Holly's question, is what would the world be like if we all treated each other the way that Jesus did? So what sort of differences might that make? So I don't know, Zoe, did you have something you were going to say there?
Well, I think there are various workable ways of doing it. Even consumerism would work, and if everybody wasn't selfish, but unfortunately we are. And that's the difficult bit. So I think we'd look a lot more socialist, because actually everybody would be looking to meet one another's needs with what they've got in their hands.
Is that socialism? They would be champagne socialism, wouldn't they? I mean, he was the most extravagant. Jesus was most
Jesus, well,
here's your socialism, right?
Thank you.
You know, when Mary poured that perfume over his feet, didn't he say, that's terrible, we can solve the NHS problem?
Yeah, in fact, he specifically says, better to do this than give it to the poor at that point.
But the other point as well, Law, is the other thing is the 20th century is a history of human beings trying to create heaven on earth and failing
Miserably.
In horrific ways.
Yes.
And I think the key thing with it is that we have seen good examples of where Christianity has been involved in macro politics, like in South America with the liberation theology movements and things like that, and that's worked very well. But also
it's hugely
as well,
unsuccessful. We've only got to look at Hugo Chavez and the disaster that kind of
what I mean is,
he had Leonardo Boff sitting next to him every step of the way.
Well, that's next my point, though. The point with it is because we have human corruption within us, right? Is that that's the fundamental problem? Is not with just the structures, is to do with our own hearts.
Because we're sinful.
And any structure that tries to build itself on a presumption that people will behave selflessly and generously and compassionately is going to fail. One of the things that's really interesting about the way that English political system is set up is that it is set up on the basis of assuming that people will be sinful and corrupt if they possibly can be, and putting in as many checks and balances against that. You know, for example, separating the judiciary from the legislature. You know, the people who make the laws aren't the same people who enact the laws, as an attempt to try and separate out the power.
Can I say that also, just taking it away from politics for a minute, in terms of our own sense of spirituality, Jesus' message was equally as dangerous and radical. When he tells us that we are sinners and that we need a saviour, that works against every aspect of our pride that we hold dear to us. And the fact that we have to throw ourselves on Christ because we need him, people don't want that, and people fight against that every step of the way. It's not just a political message, it's a message of deep internal transformation that people don't want.
Well, and conversely, it's just as dangerous to know that you are absolutely gratuitously loved, even if you are full of self-loathing. And I think that's a message that we perhaps don't say as much as we could. And I think it's the most dangerous one of all.
It's dangerous at both ends, isn't it? It's dangerous that God's love is dangerous, and God's
justice.
Justice is dangerous. Thank you.
But I think the thing is with it as well, though, is that we always have to be open to the idea of being wrong. And I think that our impression of Jesus is always going to be masked by what we bring as human beings. And I think it's only in being open to and listening to others that we're able to form that 360 view of who Christ is and how society should be. And I think the key thing with a lot of things like this is one of the big problems in our world today is our inability as human beings to listen.
Yes. One of the things that was really radical about the way Jesus did treat other people was he did listen, but also to people of every age, of any race, of both genders. You know, there was that kind of really wildly extravagant inclusivity that has not always been matched by the church.
Absolutely.
But wouldn't that transform the world?
Human situation.
Yeah, wouldn't that transform the world radically if we didn't build things on the basis of those sort of external factors? I think we need to draw that to a close, but really fascinating question, Holly. And certainly one that I'll be carrying on thinking about for a while. See you next time.
What would Jesus do? I tell you what he would do. He subscribe to TGI Mondays and like us on Facebook. And also as well, follow us on Twitter. As well as tell me off for such a crass advert.